Today's video has been sponsored by Guild Wars 2. With the recent release of Final Fantasy XVI, it can be hard to even fathom a 17th mainline entry into the FF series. Yet somewhere in Square Enix's laboratories, they are likely already cooking it, with Final Fantasy XVI beginning its development after FF14 Heavensward 3.4, which was released on September 27th of 2016. This means that 16 began its development shortly ahead of Final Fantasy XV's release, which happened on November 29th. If this holds true, one would imagine that the pre-production of FF17 is already underway, and I imagine it's likely being worked on by a very small group of people, this being purely speculation of course, which is why there is absolutely no better time to vocalize our desires about FF17. These are the absolute must-haves of Final Fantasy XVII. But first, a word from our sponsor, Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 isn't just another MMORPG. It's one where the journey matters more than the grind. The brand new expansion, Secrets of the Obscure, releasing on August 22nd, is about to redefine combat with major system enhancements, deep dive into quarterly content that unfolds throughout the year, and soar the skies of Tyria with the much-loved Wing Skyscale mount. The core story is driven by your character's choices. Then the expansions continue to tell the story of the world. Pre-purchase now to grab exclusive rewards, including the Arcane Spellweaver's hat skin, an Eagle Eye weapon of your choice, the Demon Hunter title, and a max level boost. So check out Guild Wars 2, link in the description below. First of all, when developing a modern FF title, the engine is always a huge point of discourse. Final Fantasy XVI might be the first of the HD games to have a proprietary engine and not have major issues with it. While I think utilizing Unreal Engine 5 is probably the best way forward, it also wouldn't be a terrible idea for them to reuse Final Fantasy XVI's engine. The biggest takeaway here is, use tech that is stable and proven, so that you can focus on making content for your game, rather than continuously gluing together a piece of tech that keeps falling apart. Final Fantasy XIII, Final Fantasy XIV 1.0, and Final Fantasy XV all consecutively in a row had major issues with their engine during development, leading to problematic circumstances when creating these games. Thus far, FF16 and FF7R haven't gone down that road again, and hopefully things will stay that way. I really enjoyed Final Fantasy XVI's dark fantasy setting. However, I think Final Fantasy XVII should shift away from that to a world that is much more vibrant and has a greater balance between its levity and darker moments. And while I would also like to see the next Final Fantasy shift away from a medieval setting, I also think with the presence of Final Fantasy VII Remake's trilogy, I would like a setting that also doesn't just look like the modern world. If I had to personally pick, I would love to see Final Fantasy XVII inspired by Edo-era Japan, with samurai in it. I think this would be an incredibly refreshing setting. Aside from that, there's also the incredibly impressive world shown off in the Agnes Philosophy tech demo, which many consider to be an ideal Final Fantasy setting. All of these are options that I would love to see. Now, let's talk about gameplay. I'm going to be honest, you can thank my experience with Baldur's Gate 3 for this one. However, I think that Final Fantasy XVII should focus on a much more hardcore role-playing experience. The feedback from FF16 is abundantly clear, and the game's absence of any deep RPG elements was sorely disappointing. The skill tree wasn't actually much of a tree, and the game lacks some basic fundamentals like elemental weaknesses. And I mentioned Baldur's Gate 3 for a very specific reason, a game that is absolutely exploding right now because of its commitment to the role-playing game genre. Now that's not to say that FF17 needs that extent of freedom, but I do think that it should take some notes with regards to player agency, like having systems that allow you to build your character in any way that you want to from a variety of different jobs. Speaking of, we are long overdue for the glorious return of the job system. Not only do I think it is long overdue, I think it would actually contribute to the game loop of unlocking new jobs and leveling them up, and would make for an incredibly satisfying experience. I also think that when you look at the growth systems of the past few Final Fantasy games, they've been incredibly dry skill trees. That's not to say you can't make a skill tree really interesting. Final Fantasy X did it with the Sphere Grid, grid, but that's because with the sphere grid, it provided players the freedom to cross into different characters' traditional roles, allowing this progression system to blend versatility with strategy. And it's this level of flexibility and visual journey across the grid made leveling up feel engaging and strategic. This is something that was sorely lacking with 13's Crystarium, which didn't offer the same level of choice or flexibility. 15's skill tree was alright, but it's the same type of skill tree that exists in pretty much every other game. And whatever you want to call this circle thing in Final Fantasy XVI didn't even offer what those previous ones did. All of this is to say, please give me a cool, quirky growth and magic system again like Materia, the sphere grid, or hell, even junctioning, that is fun and exciting and not a generic skill tree with points. Then we got the battle system on this game, and I'm gonna be honest, I absolutely, positively do not care if it's turn-based or action, and honestly I never have. What makes a game good is how fundamentally engaging and immersive it feels to me, both of which can be accomplished with a turn-based or action system. That said, as I've mentioned in previous videos, it absolutely needs to be something that builds off existing systems. Create a better version of Final Fantasy XVI's iconic style system that features more RPG elements and even more brutal action. Create another version of Final Fantasy VII Remake's hybrid system, which has been lavished with praise. I'm impartial either way, but you need to do something that isn't just throwing darts at a board blindly and hoping something sticks. That being said, I think there is something fundamental that this game should have, and that is controllable party members. Square Enix has tried to get away from this many times, and while I am personally okay with controlling one character, the reception of Final Fantasy XVI's lack of such has made it abundantly clear that fans aren't. It is something that fans desperately want to see happen at this point, something that they did make happen with Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it's one of the most loved features of that game. I think there's absolutely no backing down at this point. It is one of the most requested feature in every upcoming Final Fantasy, and it seems like you already figured it out once, so figure it out again. But who is going to be developing this title? With Yoshi P claiming that it probably won't be him and CBU3 working on it, it makes you wonder who is. They currently have this massive team there from Final Fantasy XVI, with one of the most sought out battle directors in the industry, Ryota Suzuki. There's no way they aren't going to work on anything major, though it's entirely possible that they're going to work on a new IP instead of FF17. What else is entirely possible is that Yoshi P is just straight up lying as he has before. Prior to FF16's announcement, he dismissed all rumors about being the director of the game, and even called those rumors annoying. Well, he wasn't lying in the sense that he wasn't the director. He was actually the producer. Furthermore, many senior staff on CBU3 such as Natsuko Ishikawa stepped into supervisor roles after the release of Endwalker. This is very similar to what happened with FF16 writer Kazutoyo Mihiro after the release of Heavensward, where he would begin to work on the game that we now know as FF16. So it's possible. The other immediate option would be Creative Business Unit 1, with such staff as Yoshinori Kitase and Tetsuya Nomura. The issue here is that the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy is literally going to be taking up all of their time for the foreseeable future. While Rebirth is coming less than a year away from the publishing of this video, there's then the third game in the trilogy slated after that. Assuming this game would take a generous bare minimum of 3 years to come out, and with the average dev cycle of the modern game being 5 to 6 years, this would likely put FF17 almost a decade away, if they were to handle it directly. And CBU1 being busy with FF7 Remake is likely why they didn't handle Final Fantasy XVI in the first place. There's also a third secret option here, and that is a brand new team inside or outside of Square Enix handles FF17. In some ways, I think I would actually find this more ideal, as it would probably bring us the freshest take on the series we've seen in quite some time. However, people are quite attached to the staff at CBU1 and CBU3, and it would likely create some unease seeing entirely new faces handle it. At the same time, I think it'd be really exciting to see some fresh faces take on the series. And now, it's time for some hot takes. The section filled with things that I specifically want that may not resonate with the broader Final Fantasy audience. For starters, keep the M rating that FF16 laid out. We're all adults here. I also don't think that an M rating means that a game has to be dark and grim. If FF7R was the exact same game but had a red blood trail, it would have been M rated by default. Second take, and God, this is a hot take. I think they should have some sort of dialogue trees implemented. Yes, I am still on that Baldur's Gate 3 high. No, I don't think they should have as much insane freedom as you do in that game. And no, I don't think they should be as frequent as Western RPGs have them. But I do think they should be more frequently a thing and allow you to have some type of player agency in branching scenarios. Next, I think there needs to be some type of interactivity in the world. I feel like this is something that quite a number of other modern games have done quite well, but in FF things are just scenery and nothing else. Let me climb a tree, loot things, set something on fire. Just have some sort of interactivity with the world itself. But these are just my thoughts on what Final Fantasy XVII could and should be. Let me know in the comments below what you most want to see from FF17, and be sure to check out Guild Wars 2, link in the description below.